Hey, hello, everyone. Welcome to Think, Engage, Thrive, our show about entrepreneurship, where we bring you the good, the bad, and the funny stories about startups and real life entrepreneurs that are working in all kinds of great things. Tonight, we've got Scott Ketchum. He's the co-founder of Sfoglini Pasta. I should be able to pronounce that. I'm Italian, but anyway, Sfoglini Pasta, organic, locally milled grains, crafted in the Hudson Valley. And it's a great product. And Scott himself has a very interesting path. He started out as a creative director, a graphic designer. He had an 18-year career doing that. And then he specialized in brand development, which, as you know, it's a big topic for us when we talk about building startups, because we talk about not focusing on product and focus on building the brand. But anyway, he's been a specialist in brand development, web design, sustainable packaging. And then he studied brewing management, which we want to get into, this path of his, and then he traveled to Europe, studied food. And then Scott and his co-founder, Steve Gonzalez, they founded Sfoglini in 2012. And so let's bring Scott in. And Scott, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Phil. It's excited to be here.
Yeah. So was this a startup of passion for the product, or did you see a niche, or how did this whole thing transpire? Kind of take us through your history and how you got to this point where you decided to start an organic pasta company.
Well, sure. Well, as you mentioned, I was a graphic designer for about 18 years and had worked in San Francisco, a little in Chicago, and eventually moved myself out to New York City, where I worked for about a good 10 years there. Jumping from doing independent projects on my own, working at small boutique design studios to do design work for everything from fashion to restaurants, to eventually working as a creative director at a studio called BBMG, which specialized in working with nonprofits. And I felt like that would take my career in a nice direction with a little more meaning and passion behind it. And ended up working with them for about 7 years in total. But eventually, in time, I found myself doing less and less design work, just more working with teams, sitting in lots of meetings, and was losing my passion for it a bit. So I decided, well, I've been building brands for other people and for all this time, and for everyone from .com startups to musical bands to even food companies. So why not just create my own product? I wasn't sure what that would be yet, but I decided I was going to make a shift at some point. So my wife at that time had a similar kind of itch to change things and wanted to mix it up. And she was working for the government, for New York State government in economic development, but really wanted to find a new passion. And both of us had really found passion in food and the craft beer movement that was really booming at the time.
Yeah.
So we had found while we were doing our jobs, all of our vacations were planned around where we could travel and eating and drinking, what we could learn about the cultures there, and decided, well, we're spending all our free time doing this. Let's make that our job. And that's when we decided to start looking more carefully there. My wife took the first jump. I went to the school that you mentioned, Siebel Institute in Chicago, and we took courses on how to start a microbrewery.
Uh-huh.
And we learned basically during those courses that, okay, I don't think we want to do that.
Why is that?
It just didn't seem the right fit at that time. But she ended up making the jump and working in craft beer. So I stuck with my job for a little longer while she got her footing in the craft beer world and found some good positions. And then I ended up making the jump to do something after that. During that whole period, I was friends with Steve, and we were introduced through a mutual friend. And he had gone and he'd been starting restaurants all over, kind of creating the pasta programs for different restaurants, and eventually even moved to Philly to open a restaurant there. But when he sold his shares in that, moved back to New York City, that's when we kind of got reacquainted, and I was helping him with a business plan for a new restaurant, which he wanted to call Sfoglini. And it was during that time, it was right when the recession was really starting around 2011, 12. And we just couldn't find a way to really make the restaurant work. But during the whole process, we had a little kind of footnote basically in our business plan that we could sell wholesale pasta during the daytime to other restaurants or even to grocery stores. And as we kept going on and looking at the business plan, we started to find a better plan in that. We realized that there was a very rich history of pasta production in New York, specifically Brooklyn, and it all had kind of disappeared over the years. But then eventually, all of those companies moved to New Jersey or were bought or sold over time. And there was no real pasta on the market that was marketing as being a New York-based pasta, kind of taking advantage of that history. So that's where we really saw that opportunity and eventually made the jump to get things started with Sfoglini.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot, growing up in New York and being an Italian in New York, I forgot about all the pasta companies that had started in New York and grown up. I mean, it's true. And they did move to New Jersey or they got bought by bigger companies. So that's great. So you started out, did you build the restaurant or did you just start out now manufacturing and wholesaling pasta?
No, we abandoned the restaurant idea after to start a restaurant in New York City, you're going to need a few $1 million for the most part. And we knew we weren't going to get that at that time. The timing just wasn't right.
Yeah.
But we decided that we could pool enough money together between the two of us to get a small pasta extruder. We just needed to find a location. And that was the real challenge. Brooklyn at the time, though, had a very up and coming food scene. A lot of people were doing new things there, doing startups. It was still somewhat affordable real estate where you could try to do things.
Yeah.
And we ended up finding a building which was the original Pfizer pharmaceutical building in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But it had been sold years prior to that. And the new owners were marketing to food companies that you could rent out individual units in there. And it was a USDA grade facility.
Oh, wow.
So we went and took a look at it, and our first space ended up being an old Pfizer laboratory. It even had the gas valves on top of the tops, like you would see in a high school science class. So we had to take all of that out and redo the whole place. But it was great. It had all this great storage equipment, great soapstone tabletops that we could clean and use as surfaces, and it turned out to be a great space and a great community over time.
Yeah. So how did you really start it? We talk about this a lot when we mentor young entrepreneurs, and we always say, when you get started, you start with your minimum viable product, but you have to go out and find a customer who really wants your product. So what came first, manufacturing the product or going out and harvesting customers?
Really, since our whole business plan was based on a restaurant, we kind of dove into the whole wholesale thing a little blind. But we decided just to jump in, give it a shot. Really, with Steve's background, he had worked in New York for a while and with a lot of restaurants. So we knew we had at least the opportunity to try to sell the restaurants some fresh pasta. And that's how we got started. We would take some orders on Tuesdays and Fridays. We would deliver fresh pasta to restaurants. Custom make whatever they needed, certain amounts. I ended up being our delivery person for probably about 4 years. So every Tuesday and Friday, I was in a van running around Manhattan all the time.
So he used his connection.
We got to start doing that.
He used his connections essentially to start selling fresh pasta, and to a couple of key clients, I guess, enough to get started, right? Enough to keep you alive.
Yeah, at that point, we were just trying to build things. Both of us were doing side jobs just to pay our bills.
Yeah.
But spending all our free time on Sfoglini. So we did that for probably about a year until we paid ourselves just enough to get by. And that lasted a lot longer too. But we really focused on the restaurants, and word of mouth started to spread. The chefs would tell other restaurants what we had available. And that whole time we were starting to figure out how to dry the pasta, which isn't as easy as it looks like when you look at old pictures of people drying things in caves or out in the open air. It doesn't really work. And maybe they were just staging those photos, but we tried all of that. And eventually our whole room became the pasta dryer. We just turned up the heat to about 110 degrees and worked in there all day in the heat. We're drying the pasta. And that wasn't very sustainable and didn't last too long. So we took an old walk-in refrigerator and had a custom humidifier and heater built into the top of it instead of refrigeration. And that became our first pasta dryer.
Oh, is that right?
And that enabled us to make small batches of about 20 to 40 pounds of pastas and then start to take them to green markets around New York City and sell direct to customers. And that's how we got our feedback and on the different things we were doing, what was working, what would sell better than others. And it was really great experience to work that closely and see the customers week after week and get all of their insight on what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, it's great customer research. So I'm sure that you went through many iterations of product, look, design before you settled on what you have today, right?
Kind of. We kind of skipped over this a bit, but we had a dual mission getting started. We tried a lot of different wheats, wanted to experiment. We felt we could produce a pasta that's on par with the more boutique pastas coming out of Italy, something that was more premium, really high-grade pasta. There was no American manufacturers doing that at the time.
Right.
And so when you went to the store, you saw the large brands and maybe one of these other boutique brands from Italy. So we had our clear goal of we wanted to be there was already a lot of cheap pastas on the market. We wanted to be something special.
Sure.
So we found the right flours we wanted. They were all coming from the Midwest, our Durham semolina. That's a hotbed to grow durum wheat there in the North Dakota area, Southern Canadian border area. So we were buying our semolina from there, and then we found whole grains from New York State that we could use. Steve had some good knowledge of different wheats to use and started experimenting. We were doing things with ancient grains, emmer and einkorn, rye, spelt, and just experimenting with anything that would stand out and be different. What could a chef use that would help their meal stand out? Or what would someone at home want of a premium pasta that they couldn't already find?
Yeah.
And that even led us to working with rooftop gardens in Brooklyn, buying the end of their basil crop and using all of that, incorporating the basil into the pasta. And so that started a whole seasonal pasta program we would do. And every 2 months we would do a new flavor. From porcini and chili pepper to beet to stinging nettles to mint to basil. We do something new all the time. And that's what we discovered customers really appreciated at first. The flavors were really standing out. They were selling quickly at the market. And those kind of got us a lot of our initial attention from the media too.
And were you doing the fresh pasta at the same time? Were you still servicing restaurants with the fresh pasta?
Yeah, the fresh pasta was a pretty good business, and we did that the entire time we were in Brooklyn. It was just we couldn't figure out how to scale it and the logistics of it when we moved out, though, years later.
Yeah.
But it was a nice, steady business. The restaurants really appreciated the quality and also the fast cook time of the fresh product. So it was great. It was just anything that involves delivery in New York City is just a challenge, though. And
oh yeah.
I was really losing my mind doing that 2 days a week. So.
Yeah,
it was tough, but it was a good moneymaker, and we just kept trying it.
Yeah.
But then the other part of your question, the shapes that we do, we settled on a lot of those early on because that was the other thing that could help us differentiate. Because in 2012, you really could just find the basics: your penne, rigatoni, spaghetti, fusilli. So we decided to pick things that would disappear over the years that have unique characteristics that would pair well with different sauces, different ingredients. So a chef could use them because they couldn't make them themselves by hand. And the public could use them because they would be something different than they might buy from a brand they might already trust and use at home.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So those two things combined, the unique wheats, the premium quality, and the unique shapes kind of created our mission of being pasta innovators. Mm-hmm.
And did you start out as organic? Or did that come?
We did. We felt I felt good about supporting American organic farming. I'm concerned about the health of our soil going forward. Climate change has always been a concern of mine. So I felt it was important to support organic wheat and the whole movement behind it. And we still do that today. We've started to venture into using conventional durum wheat too, enriched wheat, but the majority of our line stays organic.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic look and a fantastic product, but I do like the look of it when it's on a shelf or in your background, in your backdrop. I mean, I think the packaging really stands it out. It's not your normal dried pasta look that you would find in a grocery store. So I think it does have a unique look.
Thank you. We really wanted to set like a kind of a billboard effect with the boxes, but overall wanted to keep the design simple, just like our pasta. We're flour and water, and that's what. So I wanted the simplicity to come through in the design too, and just let the pasta have a nice large window. You could just see the quality of it.
Yeah, yeah. So then, so you're not in Brooklyn anymore, but so how did you get there? Because scaling any business, right? It's one thing to start the business doing manual deliveries and then going to going to farmers markets and green markets and things like that. But then at some point you've really got to start focusing on scaling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that had to present some challenges.
It did, but luckily we made a good choice on where we started the business. That Pfizer building ended up being a great location, and other food companies started to move in there. We were one of the first ones, but we started to have a good community of startups. Some of them already selling in larger groceries, some of them brand new, just getting our feet off the ground. So we were able to, any challenges or questions that came up, we could kind of look to somebody else in the building, and they'd had that experience and can help us out through that.
Right.
And it also offered full loading docks. We could get shipments out easily. It had a lot of extra perks that you normally wouldn't get in a small little startup space.
Right.
And as we grew, we started to rent a second unit and then eventually a third unit. So we had one room for packaging, one room for warehouse, one room to produce the pasta. And then we were running up and down stairs to different rooms all the time, and eventually consolidated that into one larger room that the building built out for us. So we were able to handle growth for about 4 or 5 years pretty steadily within the building. But as it became more and more popular, of course, the rent started to go up, and trying to find a larger space became really difficult. We looked for quite a while, looking at all different areas of Brooklyn, Manhattan. We looked as far out as near Rockaway and JFK Airport, and then eventually starting to look in New Jersey, and then looking anywhere within driving distance so we wouldn't have to move. But that just proved to be too difficult and too expensive.
Yeah.
But for those few years, the Pfizer building was a great home for us, and we were able to start to sell into local grocery first. Then we met stories of the building kind of spread around. So the local Whole Foods forager came to visit once in a while to see what was going on, and we had a good relationship with her at the time. And eventually, when we expanded enough, we started to go into the local New York City Whole Foods stores. Those sales grew and expanded us into their Northeast region. And then eventually that helped us make the decision to move out of the Brooklyn, as we had the opportunity to go national with them and just needed a larger space.
You went national with Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was our first large grocery chain that we started to work with, and went national in between 2018, 2019.
So you weren't really focused on e-commerce at all with your product. You were focused more on brick and mortar retail.
Well, we were focused on that for growth, but because of my background, I built a website immediately, and we were selling on there too. And that proved to be a fairly steady business. We started a Pasta of the Month Club early on, and that became pretty popular, especially during the holiday period. So we would send out a few pastas, and we would make recipes to go with them to give people either inspiration, or they could follow the recipe at home. And we would ship those out monthly in a 3-month or a 6-month or a year membership. And they would get a flavored pasta or a specific new wheat, and one of our more traditional Durham wheat pastas. So the e-commerce business year over year would just steadily keep growing. It wasn't until we moved into this facility and were able to staff up a little more accordingly. And that's when it really started to boom and be a larger part of the business.
Yeah. So when did that happen? So you were out looking for a location. You still had Brooklyn. You were still building, still growing, and then you decided you found a location up way.
Yeah,
up.
I think it took us about roughly 2 years to finally find the location and get the lease signed, which was really tough. We had equipment ordered. We started to work with a small investment group to help us with our growth. And eventually we found a nice spot in Middletown, New York. And It was a good distance away, about an hour, and my commute from my house in Manhattan to Brooklyn was an hour, no matter what, walking, subway, or
Yeah.
driving. It was an hour, and so it wasn't going to really change my life that much to have that commute. Maybe it'd even be easier. And then we found the right spot. We were looking for a building about 25 to 30,000 square feet, so we had room to grow, but and it would fit the size equipment we had ordered. We needed high ceilings. We needed to have enough power for all this more larger scale and pasta making equipment, and found that spot. But after about 4 or 5 months, the landlord that we were working with, we were just getting ready to sign the lease. He ended up signing it to somebody else, and really threw us back a long time. We were ready to go. We thought we had everything taken care of and had to start to search all over again. So that became an emergency time. We started looking further north. We were found some places in Kingston we were considering. And kind of the last place we saw was this facility we're in now in West Coxsackie, New York, which is, if you're not familiar with the area, it's about 20 minutes south of Albany. And it's a good 2 to 2.5 hours from New York City. So there's no way there was going to be a commute anymore.
Yeah. No, I love that.
It's changed. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that area of New York. I love the Hudson Valley all the way up. I grew up in the Bronx, but I'm very familiar. But you said something about an investment group, because obviously when you start to scale, you need capital, or you need capital assistance anyway. And a lot of times banks, it's not necessarily an option when you're still a startup and you're still growing. But how did you handle that part of it?
Well, we found a nice small group of investors that worked together and pooled money to help us get the equipment purchase going. But because that was taking so long, we're going to burn through that with all the equipment, and eventually the building itself, we couldn't renovate. We didn't have the funds to do that. So we had to continue to look for investment, and started to work with a venture capital group. And that's what really helped us get over that finish line and get into the new facility.
Yeah.
We'd done everything on our own up until that point. So it was a little bit of a jump, and it takes a lot of trust in everybody to work together. So but there's also a lot of pressure to get things done quickly. So
I'll bet.
We had to make the move happen fast. It took us about 6 months to build our facility out. The building we're in now used to be made, they used to make aeronautical parts here for helicopters and airplanes. So it had everything we needed, the high ceilings and the power and the strong floors, and it was great size. But we had to make it into a food safe facility. So we had to get it all partitioned and create production rooms and food safe rooms. And that took about 6 months, and then a lot of commuting back and forth during that time, finding places to live, and keeping Brooklyn going the whole time.
And still keep the business running, and still keep the business running and growing.
Yeah. So we finally, it was late June, early July of 2018, we finally started producing in this facility.
Wow.
And eventually, about a month or two later, closed down Brooklyn, and made this the whole facility. We continued to try to do the fresh pasta for about another 6 months to a year, but the logistics were just too costly. We were already charging quite a bit for the fresh product and couldn't increase the pricing. We were trying to bring a distributor in, but that was making it more expensive, and we still had to drive it down there twice a week.
I was going to say,
we had to leave here like 3 in the morning and get there by the distributor by 7. And it was really challenging. We finally it wasn't becoming profitable anymore, and had to give that part up.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not an easy area to distribute product fresh into New York City. It's a bit difficult.
Yeah, but eventually that opened the doors up. We had space now. We could produce. We could start that distribution to Whole Foods, and it enabled us to start to really look where grow the retail grocery much more. We were starting to grow our food service pasta a bit more. We also sold dry pasta to restaurants too. So we just focused on that instead of the fresh, and started to grow that business. Our e-commerce was growing as well. So we had a good, we had the business kind of split well between food service, retail, e-commerce, a little bit of private label work we would do here and there to try to keep different areas of revenue coming in case in the summertime, pasta sales slow a bit. So we would focus on trying to do other projects at that moment to keep things running smoothly. And And then you have the holiday season, our e-commerce would really boom and pick things up there. So we were doing really well until we started one thing we didn't realize, and part of growth was, especially going into a grocery store chain, is how long that process takes.
Oh,
From you walk in, hey, Whole Foods is going to bring you in nationally. Like, oh, that's great. We'll start producing tomorrow. Like, no,
yeah,
the reset cycle will be a year from now. And
yeah,
and then all of that free product and the slotting kind of fees you have to pay to get on shelf in stores, all of that's got to come. So we weren't able to really grow our sales as quickly as we needed to in this facility, and got in trouble pretty quickly. We were getting placement, we were getting interest, we had lots of great press. All those things were going well, but the speed of the grocery stores to bring new product in just was not a good fit for us at that time, when we needed to work and reach certain sales goals to keep our relationship with our investors.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's always, we've talked about that a number of times, because when is the right time? I'm a big proponent. Let me take a step back. I grew up on the retail side, and I owned a specialty food retail store, and I also invested in one, and then I had a startup in Washington D.C., which were retail food stores, which got acquired by a major supermarket chain in out of the South, and I wound up as a SVP, on the perishable side. But I always tell people when they think that they're going to go into brick and mortar right away, and I always say, take a step back and really think about it, because there's pieces to it, like you mentioned. There's the free product you've got to give out. There's the slotting fees. There's rebates, discounts, accruals, all those pieces. And we had founded a beauty chain, a beauty business in the early 2000s with a woman named Carol Alt. It was raw beauty. It was called Raw Beauty, and she was a raw foodist, and she had written books on the whole subject. And the one thing that was beneficial to that was we launched it on the shopping channels. So we had national exposure. We were in Canada on the shopping channels. We had international exposure. We were in Italy and London. And so by the time retail came along, they started calling us, like Ulta Beauty and Sephora, and the same rules apply with slotting, rebates, discounts, accruals, free product. But we were still growing, and we didn't have that kind of cash to put into slotting. And so we were in a different position, because we had built the business off retail, off brick and mortar. So when they came calling, we made it very clear, we don't have a problem going into this retailer, but we're not paying slotting, because we couldn't afford it. So we got around that, but it was really a pull strategy for us versus a push strategy, right? People trying to go in and push their product into retail, they don't understand the intricacies of brick and mortar, and it could be costly. It could hurt. Not just the timing, but all that additional cost.
Yeah, it's something it was a big learning process for me. And it's interesting you said about the slotting fees. We do, even today, we still try to renegotiate those as much as possible. But when you're a smaller brand, you don't have a lot of leverage. And if you're going to get on some of those shelves, you just got to decide whether you're going to be able to make it there or not. And really, hopefully your projections turn out to be correct, and it works out in the end, but it doesn't work out everywhere.
No, it doesn't. And that's part of the issue as well. And why I've always been against, look, I understand you have to, it has to be figured into the equation if you're going to grow and you want to be in retail. But, sometimes you pay the slotting, it doesn't work out. You didn't make enough profit to cover the slotting. And then next thing you know, you're out of the next reset. So
yeah,
it happens. But it's amazing to us, because we talk to a lot of startups, and when they always think it's easy to go into retail. We're going to go and meet people, are just going to love our product, and they're going to want to put it in. And it's not always the way it goes, right? In your case, you had something unique, something that stood out on the shelf, something that they didn't have. So that you weren't displacing an incumbent. You were providing a new product and almost a new category, subcategory of the pasta channel. So,
Yeah, and it's difficult though being a premium product too, which I'm sure the makeup was as well. The You get positioned on the shelf in a certain area, the markups are a lot higher, and you're not going to necessarily fly off the shelf like a snack food, as being a
Right.
pasta. On the East Coast, you might get families that eat pasta on a more regular basis, but in a lot of parts of the country, it's not a meal people eat every week.
Right.
So if you're a premium product, you're either for a special occasion or might sit in the pantry a little longer. Trying to gauge how fast you're going to earn back what you gave in slottings was challenging. And really, it's different with every store.
Oh yeah. Well, you've got to pick you've got to pick your retail targets wisely, where you
Mhm.
think you have the best chance. Certainly, I'm sure Wegmans works well, and places like that. The Harris Teeters of the world, where you've got a more premium clientele. So
Yeah, we found some recent retailers we've gotten in. Whole Foods has been great for us, and we've been
yeah,
growing really well there year over year. We've been in the fresh market for about 3 years now, and they've been really great for us, a good fit. And we just started in Sprouts Market about a month ago, which we're excited about. It's been a target of mine for quite a while.
yeah,
So those have been good natural, organic kind of retailers that were always on my target list. But we give every type of store a good look and analysis before we move forward with them. As we keep growing, we're looking at more and more different channels to reach people and
yeah.
hopefully get people to recognize our brand.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly it is a strategy, and it is it's almost like a chess game. You have to look at who those retailers are, where you think you're going to get the biggest return for what you're putting into it,
Mhm.
and also that are that are going to be a direct hit for the brand, that are going to help elevate the brand. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's great. So I'm sure that you hit some walls along the way, some blocks, some places where you didn't think you were going to make it, or you didn't you thought that it was too much too soon, or whatever. Any of those types of stories, and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I mean, right during that move where we just left off a moment ago, that whole move process was pretty stressful, and every day kind of was wondering, are we going to pull this off? And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress on our families. So it was a tough year when that whole move. But as I mentioned, like we were getting people to bring Sfoglini in, but we weren't going to be able to produce and make the pasta for up to a year, get it in
Yeah,
there. So our sales weren't picking up quickly, and that left us in trouble because our investment from our investors was in two tranches. So we needed to reach goals in order to get the second half of it, and we just weren't able to meet them. We got into trouble pretty quickly because of the move. Of course, there was overages with construction and things we
there.
just couldn't foresee in the move itself, and then the sales taking longer to get moving than we had hoped. It just put us in a tough spot, and so we ended up not being able to continue with our investor. Weren't even sure if we were going to be able to keep our doors open. We needed some more funds to grow into the space, and we knew it was bigger than what we needed, but we didn't want to be here 2 years and outgrow it again,
Yeah,
like everything that was happening in Brooklyn. So we eventually found a company we had met actually at the Fancy Food Show about 6 months before this was all happening. And we found a company based in Italy called D'Angelo's Pasta.
Hmm.
And they ended up working with us. And so now they're our parent company based out of Italy. We work closely together. They only make fresh pasta and we only dry pasta. So we have a great relationship and produce. And they've been good mentors for us. And we're also trying to help them understand the American market a bit better too. And we're one of the first companies that they've really started working with in the US, or subsidiary. So that's been a great relationship and helped us get through that point. But it was a rough time, and we thought there was a point here where we had to let everybody go. It was just Steve and I in here, basically selling through inventory, trying to see if we could find someone to help us or continue things on. And eventually we did find that company in D'Angelo's, and we're able to get through it and started hiring our old staff back. Got people back in here and moving again. We were able to keep our good customers, like Whole Foods at the time. I just kept them up to date on what was happening. Said we got someone working with this. We'll get through this. We're meeting all your orders. And But it was tough. There were days it was just two people here making, 40,000 square foot building trying to make it work.
That's a near death experience if I've ever heard one.
But I still don't know how we pulled that off. I mean, we certainly aren't the sole owners of the company anymore, but our parent trusts us, and we manage the company here between the two of us and keep things going.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm always a big fan of strategic investors versus just money. Because if you have somebody who understands your business and can play a role in helping you grow, it's always better. I'll use an example. We were in the razor business back in the mid 2000s, and there's only a very limited supply of manufacturers in the razor business. You basically have the big two, and then you've got maybe one or two stragglers, but we had the second largest razor company that was providing us with our product, and they were doing it because they were never in the direct to consumer business. They were strictly focused on brick and mortar, and they did private label for some of the biggest retailers, et cetera. But they had a product that they gave us the rights to for, which was an exclusive. But, and they also provided us with capital in the beginning as an investor because they wanted to really understand the direct to consumer business. So they wanted to stay close to us. But the learning from them on the razor customer, on the shaving customer, was we would have spent millions of dollars in research just to figure out some of the things that they helped us out with, and it was a long-term beneficial relationship. And I've had other examples where we've gone out looking for capital to grow businesses, and we went and found strategic capital like you did, which is a partner that's already in the business. Maybe they're in Italy, but they want to learn the United States. But what they understand about the business is more than just providing you with capital. It's really there to help you grow, I think.
Yeah, I think that has been the big difference. I mean, not to say that our investors didn't want to see those same things happen, it just needed to happen on a faster timeline.
Right.
But it's been great. Our parent company wants to really see the brand grow and be successful, and working closely with us to try to help make that happen. So it's a great relationship, and I guess everything worked out all right in the end with that situation. But it was probably the toughest time we went through, and we hadn't even hit COVID yet. So that was, but that was the most challenging, the hardest on everybody involved and our families and everything. It was just a very uncertain period.
Yeah, I can imagine. And we've all had them. I think every startup I've ever been involved with has had a near-death experience, and it's how you get through it. Some people can't get through it, and they sort of fold, and which is the easy way out. But I think, keeping your wits about you, persevering and sticking to your plan generally works out. So if you were to look back today at the business plan you wrote in the beginning, would you say you're 100% dead on? Would you say you're 50% of it? What would you say?
Well, as I said, our business plan originally was a restaurant. We never really crafted it for the business. So our business plan was more mentally in our head than on paper.
Oh, is that right?
I think we've stuck true to it. We tried to really be innovators in what we were doing, to really do things that other pasta companies weren't interested in doing at the time. And it took a few years to catch on, but with the unique shapes we were doing and the flavors, the press really liked what was going on. And we would be mentioned. Part of it, I think, was helpful to be in New York City itself and close to a lot of these media outlets. But
yeah, sure.
Early on in our success, we were one of Oprah's favorite things. We were on Martha Stewart's radio show talking with her. We were featured in the Times and in the Wall Street Journal a few times. So we were getting consistently decent press. We didn't really have any marketing budget, so that anytime we could get press, that was our marketing.
Yeah.
And we were very lucky in that respect. And that's what really helped us get our investment at some point and really helped us grow. So, And I would say it's pretty similar today. I am able to invest more in marketing now, but always needs to be more. But we were able to achieve more success with that press by sticking to what we were doing. And it was eventually, I'm going to go down another path here, but the Sporkful podcast, whose host Dan Pashman called us one day, and he had an idea for a new pasta shape, and he just wanted to find a partner to help him make it. So he had been turned down by everybody he had talked to, but because our mission was to really be innovators and try new things, we thought, why not? I mean, what's the worst thing we'll get out of this? We'll be part of this podcast and we get some more media attention. That's what I need.
Sure.
And we had no idea if we'd even be successful or could pull it off. It's not easy to come up with a pasta shape. It sounds like it should be, but it's not. And so we decided to work with him on it, and that proved to be a very huge success. So our mission, we stayed true to it, and it kept our eyes open. We found good partnerships, like our work with the Sporkful, and I think sticking to that goal of being those innovators really has paid off.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the press as part of marketing, because I'm a big fan. I'm a big believer, and I talk about it a lot. I think the term influencer gets muckied up a little bit with people. They think it's strictly, you say influencer and they think it's somebody on Instagram who's got 125,000 followers and that sort of influence. But when you think about influence, it's the press, it's TV, it's podcasts. Yes, it's social media. It's all those pieces. And when you start thinking about limited budget, and we've employed it in almost every single business we've done. We still do it today. We try and use the media as a way of marketing, because it gets your message out, it gets your brand out, and you're not spending the amount of money you would spend running ads. I'll give you an example of a good one, because when we were in the razor business for the first year, it was awful. It was terrible. We were spending money on ads, not getting anything. We were doing all the normal things. We were strictly an online e-commerce business and getting nowhere. And I was getting frustrated. And because we had just come off of Raw Beauty, and we had done well. We had sold it to a division of Johnson & Johnson, and we thought we could do it again. And so one day I'm reading in the paper. I love sports and I love baseball. And I was reading, there was a pitcher named Brian Wilson, pitched for San Francisco Giants, and he had an epic beard. Epic. It was beautiful. And he had gotten Tommy John surgery. They traded him to the Dodgers. And so this was the first time he was going to pitch in a year, and the Dodgers were making a big deal about it. So I said, why don't we offer him $1 million to shave with our razor? And really, let's see if he'll go for it. So we sent an email to his people that said, we want to offer Brian $1 million to shave with our razor, just to show how great the razor is, yada yada. And all we really needed was for them to respond back and say, we'll pass it by Brian. Because then we dished it off to our PR firm and said, we are in discussions with Brian Wilson to pay him $1 million to shave with our razor. And it went nuts. It went off the charts. Everybody picked it up. People were outraged that we would offer somebody $1 million to shave with our razor, right? And all of a sudden, social media, and at the time it was a little bit of Instagram, mostly Facebook, people were sending us body parts with hair on them, with dollar signs, like, I'll shave this for 10 grand. I'll shave this for $100,000. I'll shave this. And it blew up, but we were being interviewed everywhere, even as far as Japan, France. People were just out of control. And, it launched us. It basically got us our first round of real significant orders. And it lasted about a week, maybe a little bit more, maybe 10 days or so. And then TMZ catches Brian Wilson coming out of a gym in LA. And they said, are you going to shave your beard for the $1 million? And he said, I'm not shaving my beard for any amount of money. Well, people were outraged again that this guy wouldn't take $1 million to shave his beard, right? So it went on for about another couple of weeks. But just that stunt, it was a harmless stunt. Nobody got hurt. It wasn't like it was damaging to anybody's reputation. But the fact of the matter was that launched us, and it got us probably our first, 100,000 orders, and really, helped build the brand from there. But yeah, it was. So I'm a big I'm a big fan of doing whatever you can in the press to get, because it sustains. It becomes evergreen content. You can go out there and Google it today, Phil Masiello, Brian Wilson razors, and you'll see it pop up. But it's something like that didn't really cost us anything but time, and we probably got, we were in every major newspaper and every major sports show and every major sports radio show, podcast, people asking us how stupid we were for offering a guy $1 million. But hey, it worked. So
that's a good story. I mean, now you hear people offering that kind of stuff all the time, and everyone thinks twice about it. But that's amazing. And you never even had to do anything; you just had to leak it to the press.
Didn't have to do anything, just an email, and we gave it to our PR firm who was in New York, and they just pushed it out, and everybody went nuts. I think the trigger was that the big thing that people were yelling at us about was the fact that the guy didn't need the money, and because he was Brian Wilson, he was making 12 million, 15 million a year, and how could we be so callous as to offer a millionaire $1 million? And and then people made fun of it by offering up their body parts to shave. So it was a fun time.
Wow.
It's hard to think about those. It's hard to think those types of things up, because you have to relate it to really the product and the brand and everything. But for us, it hit on that one. So
I mean, this was more earned media because we were working with a PR agency at the time. But when we finally were at the point working with the Sporkful to launch the Cascatelli pasta, we finally had the final product, and we had to finish the development during the first stages of COVID.
Oh boy.
Which was already presenting challenges in itself, but they were good and bad. Like, we were seeing surges in ordering and an uptick in business, but we also couldn't get any materials.
Yeah.
So it was like, you get these orders and I can't fill it. I don't know when I'm going to have packaging. And so it was frustrating, but we decided to launch the Cascatelli anyway. We thought, his audience had been listening to a 5-part podcast series about the whole development. And then in the last moment of the 5th episode, he was going to say, it's now, you can get it. It's for sale on Sfoglini.com. So we made about a batch and a half. It's about 10,000 pounds we made and had packaging for. And we were hoping I'd sell through that in a month or two, maybe. Not really sure what was going to happen. But the second that podcast ended, boom, the sales started rolling in. I sold those 10,000 pounds in about 30 minutes.
That's great.
It just kept coming and coming and coming. All these pre-order changes, we don't know when it's going to ship. Keep ordering. It just kept coming. And then we've been working with a PR agency, and all of a sudden the press was on top of it. And next thing we knew, a few days later, we had filmed this earlier, but we're on CBS Sunday Morning News, and they gave us about a 9-minute segment.
That's fantastic.
They came to the factory and filmed here, interviewed Dan, took the pot. We didn't even know they did this till we watched it on TV, but they took it to chefs and had them cook with it and comment on it. And after that, we sold almost $1 million in a couple of days. So
man, that's fantastic.
So it was all great. At the same time, though, we didn't have any materials to make the pasta. I had on our website, this could take 3 to 4 months before you get your shipment. And we just had to keep that going, and the orders just continued to come. And packaging was taking us normally just about a month to get a packaging order. It was taking 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Just everything taking longer. So a lot of people that ordered that first month still didn't get their pasta until almost the holidays, and we launched in March.
Wow.
But eventually we got caught up with all that. But the press really helped it explode. He was on NPR. We were on Access Hollywood. And by the end of the year, it was Time Magazine, a top invention in Time Magazine.
I love that.
So it really just kept getting more and more notoriety, and people really loved it. That's what kept it going. Most people just thought it lived up to all the hype. I was happy that we could produce such a pasta that people were thrilled with.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's the way to get your brand out there. That's the way to do it. Is through the press and getting PR, and that's fantastic. So we're running low on time. So If you had one thing to tell to a young budding entrepreneur, somebody who's thinking about going into business, what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, this might be what a lot of people say, but you really have to give it that 110%. I put every dime I had into it. I put every hour I was awake into it. A lot of help and support from family through all of that, and even all of that, you still need a lot of help beyond that. But
Oh yeah,
you have to you can't be jumping into a new company and think it's not going to take all of your life over for a while.
yeah,
And that's the thing you really have to sit and accept right away. And as a graphic designer, I had started a webzine in the 90s. I had done some other things, and really, I was familiar with what it would take to get a company going. But the Sfoglini was a whole other monster. It really took over.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point, and you can't hear it enough. You have to commit and you have to persevere, because if you're dedicated to it and you believe in it, then you just have to keep moving. So, and overcome whatever obstacles. Well, Scott, I really appreciate it. I think it was a great conversation. I really enjoy the product. I think you did a fantastic job. I love the stories, and I wish you much success. I think it's just going to continue to grow. It's a fantastic product. I've loved it for quite some time, and I do eat pasta quite a bit in our house. But again, thanks for being on, and I got a couple of closing things to do. So
thank you very much, Phil. It's been great talking to you today. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to continuing our conversation sometime.
Yeah. Look forward to it. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
So you've heard Scott's story, and again, as an entrepreneur, for him to go through what he went through and have that near-death experience, and we've talked about near-death experiences before. Sometimes you just have to push through. Sometimes you have to persevere. And if you believe in what you're doing, and you believe in, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, you just have to keep going. But I thought it was interesting that if we always like to look back on the plan when we started, and see if we're still on track, or if we've had to pivot, or what we've had to do. And as you heard, he's very committed to what his core principles were in his planning stage. So again, a great discussion. I think a great entrepreneurial story, and a great product, a great brand. I really do think, as we've said before, focus on building the brand, not selling product. Building the brand and sell the brand. So a great example of that. I think they've done a fantastic job. So again, next week we've got another great guest coming on. We're going to get more into the technology side, talking about more AR, VR type things, and AI again. So look forward to next week, and we'll see you then. And great talking to you. And again, go to philmasiello.com. I've got a great business planning tool. If you go to the top right corner, it's free. You don't have to worry. It doesn't cost anything. It's a great business planning tool for young entrepreneurs, because over my years of building businesses, it's really focused on what you need to focus on, and really get your thinking correct, and not get muckied up with some extraneous things. So again, take advantage of that. It's free, and it's a great little tool. All right. And again, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.